7:07 on CJAD. Welcome to today's Entrepreneur, a program about the entrepreneurial spirit that drives Quebec business. My name is Dan Delmar, along with Josh Miller of Fuller Landau, back from Hong Kong. How are you, Josh?
Ni hao. You know, I had to throw something in. Excellent, Dan, as always, although it is 8 a.m. in the morning for me. But I'm wide awake here with the great show that we're going to have tonight.
And on today's Entrepreneur this evening, Bosko Milekic of Adgear. Welcome, Bosko.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
So first we begin the program, of course, by talking a bit about what Adgear does.
Sure. So Adgear is first and foremost the software ad product or ad platform used on one hand by publishers to sell, deliver, measure, and ultimately optimize ads on their websites, in their online video content, and in some cases in their mobile applications. On the other hand, it's also used by advertisers or agencies who represent the advertisers to buy, deliver, and measure ads online.
Now, how long has the company been around?
Okay, so we are about 5 years old now. We started off about 5 years ago, actually incubating as a tiny division in Cassette, which, for those of you who don't know, is a large advertising agency. And just about 3 years ago now, myself and my partners, Vlad and Eve, bought into the business. We basically agreed with Cassette that the best way forward for the business was to create an independent entity that we had control over, and that ultimately that would improve the product for both agencies or buyers as well as publishers or sellers of ad media.
Did you find that it was too restrictive, too large of a corporation, too much bureaucracy? Like, would the service or company or whatever idea that you guys had and the service, would it still have flourished within that large group, or really took a life of its own?
I think it could have flourished within that group, but I think that it was more the realization that as a platform, we needed to get closer also to the sell side of media. To really enable, to really be able to innovate in the space, we needed to technologically provide better tools for sellers as well. A lot of the decisioning that happens on the internet when an ad is being picked starts at the sell side or starts at the publisher side. That was, I think, one of the key realizations. And so it's not that it wouldn't have been able to exist within the agency context. I just think it would not have been as big, or it wouldn't have had the same scope that it has today.
Now, the idea to start this service, this plan, this online business, is that something that started with Cassette, started with some of the individuals within? Where did the idea come from?
Yeah, so about 5 years ago, when we actually started, when we decided we were going to build a new ad platform, kind of start from scratch. At that time, myself, my partners, and some of the senior members of our team were working on a proprietary ad platform within Cassette. So it was an agency-side platform used mostly for buying and for direct buying on publisher websites. We've been doing this for a while, so we're quite familiar with the space, and I think that the realization was that in order to do something big, we had to, in a way, start from back up and start from scratch a bit. And we're very fortunate, actually, that the folks at Cassette at the time agreed, and I think they've benefited from the independence of the business as much as we have.
So it was really a smooth exit, if you will.
Yeah, in a way it was.
Was there a lot of history? I mean, you mentioned your two other partners, Vlad and Eve. I guess you all gathered or met at Cassette?
Yeah, we did. So to back up a little bit, I mean, prior to working in online advertising tech or stuff, so I was more in, my background is computers and technology, as you can imagine. So, and actually my role in the company is I'm the vice president of technology. So my partners also have a background in technology. They have more experience than I do in building businesses. And actually Eve, our president, was at Cassette as the result of a prior business that was acquired by Cassette. And similarly, Vlad was also working in the online ad space prior to arriving at Cassette. And so I started to work with them at Cassette about 6 years ago now.
Now, when you move out into your own, is this something that I guess did you have a plan when you moved out?
That's a great question. I think that maybe this might be a little atypical from what you might usually get, but for me it was kind of a thing that I see as the whole independent business thing is a way to achieve what we want to achieve, which is to build a great ad product, and we think that at least I think that's the way to go about it. So it's kind of, I don't want to say a necessary evil, but it's one of the necessary things and really key things that I think I had to do to be able to do that. So that's kind of my perspective on it.
But from a business plan standpoint, did you and your partners kind of attack or really go through whether it was the marketing, the financial, the sales, the management, the people, the human resource? Did you kind of go through it in detail before you kind of step foot outside the door and launch on your own, or was it a bit of a leap of faith?
Right. So, we've had, like I mentioned, the good fortune of incubating for a while and actually building up the basis of the product prior to becoming independent. So, for instance, by the time we did the buyout, we were already cash flow positive. So that's a big thing. And actually, one of our internal measures of success was to become, as a business, not just independent in terms of control, but independent also in terms of revenue, to diversify in terms of revenue. And I'm happy to say that, we've been able to achieve that over the last 2 years, where, while maintaining Cassette as an important customer as well. So, I mean, does that answer the question?
Yeah, no, I think it does. I think it's very interesting that, the idea isn't necessarily from scratch, but it was with a group of people, and then you were able to kind of carve it out of a larger organization and make it work. And when we come back after the break, it'll be interesting to hear the developments of how then you build that business into your own and gain to the 20, 30 people that you have today.
Today's Entrepreneur on CJAD with guest Bosko Milekic of Adgear. 718 on CJAD, inspiring stories from outstanding business people, Dan Delmar and Josh Miller of Fuller Landau, and our guest this evening, Bosko Milekic of Adgear.
And before we left, we were talking a little bit about planning, a little bit about leap of faith versus putting stuff on paper. Now, Bosko, the ad business, the online ad, I mean, there's probably thousands of directions you can go. How did you choose what direction? What was the plan? What was the forethought of going in? And how important was it to really think ahead?
Right. So you're totally right. I mean, if you look at our industry, it's there's a famous slide, I think, on called the Luma slide that shows you all the main players in the industry, and it's kind of split. They try to split the slide by kind of niche. And it's very, if you look at that slide, you'll quickly become confused. There's so many different players doing so many different things, and some of them are media players. They're either buying or selling media themselves. Some of them are middlemen, and then some are technology players like us, and then there are some that are technology and media players. And so, when we started, it wasn't clear that we were just going to do ad serving. We had lots of ideas. All in a way riffing off the online advertising. Mm-hmm. That's what we knew. That's what we knew how to do well, and how to build a team to do. But as we move forward, we found that one of the hardest problems in online advertising is still fundamentally ad serving. And doing that well is difficult. And moreover, if you look at that slide I mentioned, there's only a few players that do ad serving at their core. So they're ad servers.
Again, what's ad serving specifically? Pretend you're talking to somebody that has no idea what it's all about.
Great.
You don't have to pretend too hard because I really don't know what it's all about.
All right, so that's when you let me try to simplify this. When you go to a website, and if a website has ads on it, usually there's a little piece of code on that website that calls a server on the internet to return an ad. And so the server or servers that return that ad, that actually pick the ad to serve and serve it out and then measure it, are called ad servers. And so around this space or within this ecosystem, you have a whole a plethora of different players that will insert themselves into the ad call, or collect data during the ad call, or provide data to be used during decisioning in that ad call. Now, what we do is ad serving. So we connect all of those players together, and we provide the tools to publishers, so that those people who own and operate those websites, as well as folks who are buying on those websites, to deliver those ads and measure them.
So you must have, we'll call it, thousands, millions, billions of transactions that go.
Yeah, well, I can give you some numbers. Now, I have to get a little technical to give you some numbers, but I'll try to stay broad. So we do approximately 10,000 transactional ad requests a second right now today. And in addition to that, we do several tens of thousands of requests, what we call bid requests a second. And this is because our platform, in addition to facilitating direct connections between publishers and agencies, also enables buying on some of the big public ad exchanges. So the ecosystem itself, the ad ecosystem, has evolved over the last 5 years or so, to the extent where some of these big exchanges or marketplaces where you can buy and sell advertising on the internet have opened up. And so much like what you might see on some of the big financial markets, you can, if you have a seat, or you're using a technology platform that has a seat on some of these exchanges, you can, with that technology, listen to the right to basically potential bid requests or people surfing the internet, and use that tech to then decide whether or not you want to buy the right to show that person an ad.
Now there must be a huge amount of hardware that's needed to be back up, to measure, to operate your business. Is that something that has changed over the years? Did you plan enough in advance so that you could capture and be able to grow with it?
Right, that's a great question. That is one of the biggest challenges actually that we have as a business, and it really ties into a lot of other things. It ties into how we staff, the type of expertise that we look for when we hire. We operate several data centers. They're globally distributed. So we have a couple in North America East. We've got one in the West Coast. We've got one in Europe. And so we distribute traffic to these data centers, and all of them deliver ads and collect data. And that's, as you can imagine, quite challenging. And it's even more challenging to affect change and, innovate in that kind of environment. And so that really affects how we, who we hire and what tech we also use to solve problems.
Sounds like there was quick growth and a little bit of growing pains. And I think when we come back, we'll kind of listen on the lessons that Bosko and his partners learned in the early years.
Today's Entrepreneur on CJAD 800 with Bosko Milekic of Adgear at 7:23. 7:25 on today's Entrepreneur. Our guest is Bosko Milekic of Adgear. We're talking about how this business grew, Josh, and 4 different data centers around the world. And especially in this business, security is always a concern. So, Bosko, tell me about that, and how do you ensure the security of your clients?
That's a great question. So, there's several levels to the security question, and I mean, let me just talk about data for a second, because I think data, and especially user data, and what is collected and what is used, I think there's a huge misconception, maybe, that the public, some of the public at least, has about what kind of data is collected. So one very important aspect of what we do is that we do collect user data, but anonymously. So what that means is that we ID users as they browse the internet. We don't know their identity. There's no way to go back to their actual identity, so their name, their location, phone number, etc. But what we do have is our data points on those users. So we might know that a particular user, with ID 123 went somewhere else, and that somewhere else may or may not be useful in deciding on whether or not to show that user an ad. Similarly, the context in which they're browsing. So if, depending on the content that they're looking at, if they're looking at car videos versus sports videos, all of that could also potentially affect the decisioning. And so it's in that capacity that we use data. Now, while doing all this, we also obviously provide opt-out mechanisms, and our privacy policy is extremely transparent with respect to what cookies we use to label users anonymously, and how they can opt out of that if they wish. And then with respect to actual security around the data itself, so as you can imagine, with several data centers, we collect data at a lot of edge locations. And so because of the volume of data that gets generated, some of it gets processed at those edge locations and gets discarded. And the transactional, whereas the transactional data that we use for billing purposes gets aggregated and pulled into a central location over secure connections. And so when we store it, we also obviously take the storage of the data and the archiving of it extremely seriously as well.
It sounds like, certainly with the growth and innovation, I'm going to switch gears a little bit here and say there's got to be a lot of research and development. I mean, have you been able to take advantage of the government tax credits in this, as what's popularly known as SHRED, and use it to your advantage and keep your cash flow going? How important was that?
So that's a great question, and it was very, very important, and it continues to be. And obviously, as we grow, the proportion of SHRED credits that we claim, relative to the salary the salary mass that we have is lower and lower. But especially in growing, I mean, we just a little bit of background. So I've been doing SHRED prior to Adgear. I was doing it at Cassette. I've gone through several audits. My partners also have a lot of experience with it. So we're very familiar with the program. We think it's an extremely helpful program for businesses here. Not being venture backed, it was even arguably more important for us to grow. And it actually even ties a little bit into the buyout itself. So as an independent business, we actually got access to better SHRED ratios. True. So that was a big deal for sure.
And so these are reports you're doing pretty much on your own. You've gained a certain amount of knowledge that really propels your cash flow.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, SHRED is something that we've kept internal forever with Adgear, and we take it very seriously. We actually take those documents. It's important for us for them to be accurate. And it's important for us for them to be useful. And similarly, we do a lot of stuff with open source software as well. We definitely benefit a lot from the open source communities online, and we contribute back whenever we can. And we intend to continue to do that as we grow. So some of the stuff we claim for SHRED actually has really served to advance other people's projects as well.
I think it's great, and with that growth theme, certainly we'll come back after the break and say, well, how do people get to know that you're out there, other than your launch from Cassette, and of course, you're still three partners. You got to have a shareholders agreement. You got to get along. So I think we'll touch base on that as well.
Today's Entrepreneur with Bosko Milekic of Adgear continues in a moment. Welcome back to today's Entrepreneur on CJAD, presented by Fuller Landau, a program about the entrepreneurial spirit that drives Quebec business. Dan Delmar and Fuller Landau's Josh Miller with you Monday nights at 7 here. And our guest this evening, Bosko Milekic of Adgear, a very innovative ad company. We were talking about some of their history. Josh branched out of Cassette, went separate, I guess became their own entity, and are really doing some very innovative stuff online in terms of advertising. And I'm still trying to get my brain around how some of this works. It also requires a lot of good people with a certain skill set. And it absolutely does, and it requires people to know that you're out there. I mean, even before you get going, with the few people that you had at the outset, how do people know you were there? Where did you, with the growth early on, how do people know that Adgear existed? Right.
So a lot of it is direct relationships that myself and especially my partners had with different folks in this space, especially here in Canada. And then over time that built up it extended to some relationships with folks from the States and Europe. And in fact, most of our bigger clients thus far have been inbounds. So they found us. And we don't do much advertising. I mean, we do a little bit of it's a little ironic, I know, but we do. We're a B2. Like, the first thing to realize is we're a B2B business. So the type of advertising we do it tends to be very focused on folks. For instance, folks who visited our website or who visited other websites that we know are relevant for our market. But for the most part, it's been inbounds. So, and usually the inbounds, at least the ones that end up panning out successfully, are folks who are building, who either already have media companies or are building media companies and are looking to do something innovative with ad technology. And because it's difficult for them to do that with shrink-wrapped products, they come to us, and we give them a platform that first of all is modern, so that's been built in the last 5 years. And given that the landscape has evolved a lot, especially over the last 5 years, that's a big advantage. So software being malleable as it is, over time, if the context changes, if the requirements change, sometimes it just makes sense to simplify and start from scratch. And I think that's what we're providing.
Do you have a goal? Do you and your partners have a goal of providing a service or building a brand?
So primarily to build a brand and a product. That's our primary goal. And ultimately also a platform that powers other products. So, there are folks, like I mentioned, who are building other products on top of ours. And so for us, that also adds to the quality and I think the health of the business. Now, around that, obviously, there's a service component as well. So we do have staff that is dedicated to servicing the product and actually working, not just doing customer support for our own product, but also helping our clients and partners integrate with other platforms, including other ad platforms.
And so what about the future? Like, do you plan on, it sounds like your marketing efforts have truly been kind of sit back. We have this great group of this great network and people are coming to us. Is there a plan? Are you looking ahead to maybe open the doors a little bit more and maybe be a lot more proactive in the marketing?
Absolutely. That's why I'm here. That's why I'm here, Josh.
the online guy that comes on radio to market.
Exactly. No, we do, and in fact, it's one of our big objectives for next year is to really open the floodgates with marketing and come up with it's actually to build the real go-to-market strategy for Adgear. So that's definitely one of the big things we're looking forward to in the upcoming year.
Does an online business only market online?
Well, that's
well, he's on radio, so I guess
partially
not.
Aside from tonight.
I don't think so. I don't think it depends what the business does, but I don't think so. I think it has less to do with whether you're just online or not, and more to do with what you're actually selling, or what the business is about. So if you're selling clothing, for instance, and maybe you're selling it exclusively online, I think if you have a brand, it still makes sense to promote that brand in other media, in other channels.
Mm-hmm. Now, let's switch gears just a little bit. Your 3 partners. Are you diverse backgrounds? Do you all have the same knowledge or different knowledge?
I think we have complementary kind of knowledge and experience. We all do have a technical background. I think everyone in the business right now has one way or another a technology background. Most of our staff right now are software engineers.
Have you been able to develop separate roles for each of you?
Yeah. So I would say that our focus is very different, and that's actually very important. I think in our day-to-day relationship, to carve out some specific roles. So my partner Vlad, for instance, focuses on product, on defining the product, on marketing it, and developing the business ultimately. Whereas Eve does also that, but also does financials. So he's more the financials guy, and I myself, along with a cast of 20 now or 25 are technologists ultimately. So and even within our little group, I would say responsibilities are pretty divided. I think one of the key things, at least for me, was to when hiring, is to hire folks who are ultimately better than me at something. And I'm not, I do certain things with technology well and other things not so well. And I think the reason for doing that is so that you can give up more control to other people, because that's when great things happen, when they depend less on you and you alone, and more on the, kind of beautiful relationships that come out with people, just bright people just working with one another.
I think you're perfectly correct. And as we talk about human resources and the talent pool that you've been able to put together, because, you're now getting close to 30 people from the beginning, which was just a few. Was it difficult to find the talent? How did you find it? How did you keep it? How do you keep them motivated?
Yeah, so it is difficult. I think one of the reasons it's difficult is that to do the kind of stuff that we do and be able to move fast and do it still do it at scale. And like one of the things about us and about the tech that we write, it's not just software that we build and then put out there. It's software that we build, put out there, and then operate. And any kind of slowdown that could happen when you're operating a server technology like that on the internet ultimately directly affects our customers. So it's just unacceptable. And so the challenge, one of the big challenges is being able to innovate within that kind of environment. And that sometimes requires making use of technology and programming languages, for instance, that are not very popular, that are arguably exotic. And so finding folks who, A, have an interest in those languages, B, are very good with them, are motivated
It's challenging.
is challenging, yeah.
Do you extend your search beyond Montreal, beyond Quebec, beyond Canada?
We do. I've had, we currently have a couple of people working for us from other cities. So we have one gentleman who works from a remote area in Quebec, actually the Saguenay area. And
Because of his skill set?
because of his skill set, yeah. And we have another, we have actually a small team in Toronto that mostly does servicing, so ad operations and professional services. But one of the folks in Toronto is also a developer, so he's actually on our development team. And historically, I've tried working with folks who are remote workers, and in some cases it worked well, and in others it worked less well. I think ultimately it comes down to culture and how people communicate, whether they're in the same room or not. It can be secondary. It isn't always, but it can, and when it is, then it works well.
And is that a culture that the three partners are on the same page with, and have you set that from the get-go?
Oh, for sure. And I think not just the three partners, but everyone in the company ultimately plays ball.
Have you just quickly as we come up to the last few seconds of this segment, what is you've grown from just a few to 30. Is it difficult to maintain that culture when every time you bring somebody in or people in, how do you kind of just get them to be on board?
Especially when they're remote.
Yeah. It is difficult, and I think that we're quickly approaching the stage where we're going to have enough staff that we're going to need some layer of middle management or something that at least fulfills that role. And the danger there, I think, is that when you have that layer, there's the potential for communication to break down. You can no longer put everyone in the same room and just agree on something and then sail the boat in that direction. It becomes more complex. So moving forward, next year, I think that's going to be one of the big challenges is how to do that, how to accommodate more staff, remote and non-remote.
And coming up, speaking of staff, we're going to talk HR issues with Micheline from Fuller Landau, Josh. So that is on the way. 7:49, inspiring stories from outstanding business people, Dan Delmar and Fuller Landau's Josh Miller. On today's Entrepreneur, our guest this evening, Bosko Milekic of Adgear, and we bring in as well Micheline Maillet, HR consultant at Fuller Landau, to talk, of course, about people, Josh, and particularly difficult in some cases with technology businesses. You have people all scattered around the planet, staring into the computer screens. It's a bit tougher in some cases.
Bosko ended talking about telecommuting, talking about hiring remote people. And I think, Micheline, maybe you can enlighten us on a little bit of the challenges or what you feel are the important aspects to deal with those employees that aren't sitting at a desk around the corner from you.
Yeah, I think today with technology, people can work from almost anywhere. There's a lot of employers now that are still skeptical or, not really into the whole thing yet, just because they feel that it's difficult to control the work of the employees when they're not sitting in front of them. It's kind of that old mentality of like the person sitting there and you want to kind of watch over their shoulder to make sure that they're actually working all day.
You pace by their desk every now and then.
Yeah, exactly. Make sure they're not on the internet.
Yes.
So yeah, I think one of the most important challenges is definitely the communication. There really has to be a lot of communication from the employer in terms of what they expect at the end of the day, because it becomes much more difficult to pay somebody by the hour or for a certain number of hours when they're kind of left on their own and you can't really see what they're doing. I mean, normally people working from home will still have certain work hours, but at the end of the day, you want to make sure that you have results that you can measure their performance on to know if they're meeting, doing what they're supposed to be doing and meeting their goals.
So a written policy, I mean, if you have a policy manual or even not, you should have something as clear as possible in black and white.
Yes, definitely. Definitely. I mean, even in terms of the work environment where the employee is working, you have no control over that. So you do have a right, though, to control it to a certain extent. For example, if an employee were to hurt themselves at work, at home, if that's a regular workplace, then that would still be considered as a CSST claim. But it's obviously much more difficult to control the work environment when they're working from home.
Are there any suggestions? I mean, it's not as if you can install a punch clock at everybody's house. And even if you monitor their online activity, I don't know, Bosko, maybe you're in a better position. How can you monitor online activity if they're actually doing it? I mean, you monitor keystrokes, how do you know they're actually working?
Right. Well, with the size that we have, and I think there's a level of trust, first of all, between, me and the people we hire, where I would never want to monitor their activity just because of our size. And I think, maybe this is for a business in maybe a little different context than ours, it might be key. But I think it is important, like to have key results. I think that's totally important. And if you don't have that, I mean, whether or not you're monitoring, it doesn't matter because, everyone's running around like a headless chicken. So I think that and for us, like with respect to key results, it's not that difficult. I mean, we're building product, so there are obvious results in the product that you can look for.
As long as stuff gets done at the end of the day, then you're fine.
Exactly.
As measurable stuff. It can't just be something intangible, because then how are you going to, as Bosko's saying, measure that result?
Yeah.
There's certain things sometimes that maybe appear more intangible. One thing I see often is having sales reps working from home. It could be in different countries, different cities. But there's always something that you can measure. I mean, it's hard. You don't always want to go check up on the person after, but you can see how many places they called, what they've, timesheets, for example, that type of thing, to have a general idea of what the person's doing with their time.
And certainly, I guess it depends a lot on the culture of the company and how people interact with one another. I think that also certainly plays into it, as we were talking about earlier. I think when we come back, we'll also talk about finding people. How are we, Bosko mentioned it's sometimes difficult to find people. You have to find somebody remote. So we'll talk a little bit about recruitment when we come back from the break.
Today's Entrepreneur on CJAD. 7:55 on Today's Entrepreneur. Our guest this evening, Bosko Milekic of Adgear and Micheline Maillet, HR specialist at Fuller Landau, talking about, of course, people issues, HR issues, particularly in a technology business like Bosko's.
And recruiting, how do you find them? What are some techniques that work, that doesn't work, whether it's here remotely? Micheline, maybe you can enlighten us.
I think one thing that a lot of entrepreneurial companies forget to do is actually plan and decide what it is that they want. They don't really sit down and plan where are we going, what type of skills do we need. Sometimes it's great. You might get a random candidate that has a skill set that you think, I could actually move into this area. But, for the most part, as they're growing in a lot of small, medium-sized businesses, even adding one person is a major decision for them. So you'd think this decision should be planned out a little bit. They get to the point where they kind of write their ad and then they post, and after they'll meet the candidate and say, this is not really what I need right now. So I think if they took the time beforehand, they would see the results a lot faster in the process.
Kind of like create a real full job description?
Yeah, with the prerequisites, and make sure that they're realistic as well. Sometimes could be budgetary constraints. They want somebody at a high manager position, but they're going to pay somebody at, maybe a clerical level or a little bit more. So, I think they have to be realistic too and decide what they want or what they can get within their budget as well.
And where do you find the best places to post the ads?
Definitely online today is the best place to place ads. There's different sites that are available. There's some that work better than others, and it's often geographic as well. Depending what city you're living in, there's certain sites that are better.
People still use newspapers?
Sometimes, not as often anymore, but we had a couple of clients recently that wanted to post in the newspaper, and they actually got some results from it. So,
what about those free classified sites like Craigslist or Kijiji?
I've heard companies get results from them, but a lot of companies feel like it's not going to represent themselves well by posting there. So the image that it projects of their company by posting on Kijiji or Craigslist is maybe not going to get the best level of candidate after.
No, and I think the most important point that Micheline raises, as we said earlier with Bosko and Adgear, is you just got to plan ahead, and you really just can't shoot. You can't be random. You really got to say, okay, if I'm looking for this person, well, you want to narrow the target as much as possible. And I think as we come to the end of the show, I turn to Bosko, and I'm sure there's a number of items that he's learned over the last few years. But if there was a piece of advice that to give to today's entrepreneur, what would that be?
So surround yourself with great people, hopefully people who are better at you at what you're trying to do, or at least some aspects of what you're trying to do. And also try to be patient. It's hard. I mean, me of all people know that, I think, but it's important. That's it.
I think, and Dan, the takeaway I get, and certainly I'll start with the surround yourself with great people, great talent. Bosko mentioned earlier that that's the only way you're going to make a great company. That's the only way you're really going to grow. And I think that's hugely important. A one-man show can only take it so far. You get great people around you, and that's what's going to make you flourish and make you bigger than what you can be on your own. I think the other point that was kind of glossed over a little bit, but came back to, is they really know their business well, and they control what they have to. In Bosko's example of, we really take care of the research and development tax credits, and they really get into it and they really know it, it's because they know their business well. They're not cursory about it. They really get into it, and they control it, and they make the best out of it for themselves. And I think that's a huge lesson for entrepreneurs to learn is, you might know a little bit about your business, but that's not going to get you somewhere. You really got to know it. You can't just say, I'm okay in this, and you got to try and know as much as you can. That's what's going to really fill your pockets, make you grow, and make you a success.
Bosko Milekic of Adgear. Thanks very much, Bosko.
Thank you. Happy holidays.
Same to you.
Happy holidays.
Micheline Maillet from Fuller Landau HR. Thanks for joining us this evening as well.
Thank you very much.
You can reach Fuller Landau during business hours at 514-875-2865 or visit www.flmontreal.com. Josh, we're back here next Monday night at 7 for our annual checkup.
Our annual checkup, our annual cookie checkup.
With Felix and Norton, so stay tuned for that. Thanks very much.